My name is Tony Hammock. I'm here in the studio with Charlie Fuquay, also known as the King of Controversy, and we're going to have a nice discussion about who knows what. We haven't discussed what we're going to discuss yet, but we're going to have a good time doing it anyway.
We always do, don't we?
Yeah, I do. Anyway, I know, and I hope our listeners enjoy our normal bantering back and forth, and we can have a nice chit chat. I wanted to start off with something that to me is. I don't know how important it's going to sound to our listeners or be to our listeners, but I'm like I'm trying to live a Spirit-led life, Charlie. I'm trying to be led by the Spirit. You know, I believe in John chapter 3, Jesus Christ said, in order to be born again, you've got to be born of water and born of the Spirit. And he said, everyone who's born of the Spirit's like the wind. You can't see where they're coming from. You can't tell where they're going. So it is with everyone who's born of the Spirit. So there's this component to a Spirit-led life where you react to unctions of the Holy Spirit. And I've been around the church long enough to recognize that sometimes people have unctions and they really just kind of have indigestion, you know. It's maybe not really an unction, and I'm not here to judge anybody on that, but I just had this unction yesterday to pick up a video I was watching on YouTube. And it may seem like a strange subject, but it was on the nation of Liberia. And I've got a minister friend who's connected to another minister friend of mine named Frank Wan. And this guy's name's James Porkpa. Like the pig, you know, pork, puck, P-A-U-G-H,
okay.
Pow, or paw. He says a puck. Anyway, James lives in Liberia. He's a Liberian, and he's come over to the States to minister, and he's an anointed man of God, and he's a pretty interesting man.
Now, is Liberia predominantly a black population?
Yeah, I think so. I'd say 100%, 99.98% black population. It was I think it was a colony of the United States, actually. It's one of the only... at that time, the United States did a little foray into colonization, and so the Liberian flag actually looks exactly like the United States of America, but it's got one star instead of 50.
Okay.
So, in the capital of Liberia is Monrovia, which was named after Monroe, the president of the United States.
James Monroe.
Yeah. So, I started watching this documentary on Liberia, and I stopped. And this was, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 months ago, and I just really got this unction. You need to watch that documentary. And it's done by this organization. It's not a Christian organization, and I think their agenda in producing the video was to create these sensational thoughts and ideas, just really weird, bizarre, extreme things. And you know, you go into parts of Liberia and you're going to find exactly that. I mean, you're going to find weird, bizarre, and strange things because the country was very war-torn. There's a tremendous amount of poverty, some of the worst ghettos in the world. I'm talking open sewage in the streets, no public restrooms, the beach is the bathroom, drug-addicted and trashed-out prostitution, just you name it, just all these horrible things. And I was kind of like watching this because it's such an extreme reality, but it's humanity, you know. And
it's where we are without Christ.
Exactly. It is what happens if Jesus comes out of the hearts of people.
Yeah.
And anyway, the video goes on, and the people there, not all of them, but many of them are radically undereducated. I mean, they have no education. And so there's this component of, when the war was going on, this just anarchy, just wild, just violence, just no control. And so these men would ascend the ranks and become warlords in this culture. And they would name themselves kind of what we might consider a strange name, but it was a name of intimidation. So one guy names himself Rambo. I'm General Rambo, you know, and so, oh man, that's like John Rambo. We've all seen that movie. I guess they've all seen the movie, I don't know. And then one guy names himself Mosquito, General Mosquito. And, we think, well, that's a stupid name, but in Liberia, mosquitoes kill more people than anything else through malaria. So to name yourself Mosquito was a terrifying name to a Liberian. So then another warlord, he's going to one-up that guy. So he names himself Mosquito Spray.
Okay.
This is all true stuff. This is really going on in Liberia. So it's just really bizarre. It's really odd. And but what it shows me is what humanity really is capable of at its, maybe, I don't want to say its lowest common denominator, but when the sinful nature is left unchecked, what happens? And we have a lot of people in our culture, because we live in a postmodern era or a post-Judeo-Christian ethic, whatever you want to call that. We're living on the blessings of our ancestors. We've got generational patterns of thinking that are put into us.
Absolutely.
Because of Judeo-Christianity and the ethics of our parents. And a lot of people will break away from what they would call organized religion and say, well, I'm not into organized religion. That's made by man. I don't want to be part of that. But their parents were immersed into that. Their parents raised them in God. They raised them with ethics and character. And then they, as young adults or adults, detached from what they call organized religion. And now they're living on the inheritance. They're living on the blessing. They're drawing from the principle of character that they've received from their parents.
And that blessing's going to run out.
The blessing will run out, because those kids that they have will have a measure of that, but it'll begin to diminish every generation, I believe, if you don't put Jesus Christ as primary, front and center into that family.
Can I say something from a law perspective as a lawyer? People go to court because they have disagreements or disputes. And what a lot of people don't realize is in the business world in the United States of America, how many hundreds of thousands, hundreds of millions of business transactions take place every day, and there's never a dispute.
Yeah.
And that's because, by and large, people trust each other. And that is what makes America work. We don't even stop to think about these things.
It's ethics.
It's ethics. It's because we have an ethic.
Internal controls.
Right. And it's also, and I want to say this because I'm very much a free enterprise guy.
Yeah.
It's caused by competition. If I go to your store and you cheat me, I'm not coming back.
Right.
So if I have choices, that forces us to be ethical.
Right. It's like the power of the review. You got these internet companies, and you've got 141 reviews, and 137 of them are 5 stars. Well, hey, I'm going with that. That sounds pretty good. People that have gone before me, and they're not gonna, they're not gonna lie. They're gonna tell you, hey, straight up.
But when those ethics in society break down, and they're breaking down in our society, and people's trust for one another, when a handshake doesn't seal a deal because you're dealing with somebody who's going to do what he said he's going to do. That's when commerce breaks down, business breaks down. Our society is based on morals.
Absolutely.
And we can say, oh, well, all that doesn't matter, It's the foundation. When the foundation's gone, it's gone.
Right.
Okay, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, that's good. And so these warlords... and remember, I really believe that the Holy Spirit has prompted me to watch this video.
Okay.
So I'm scratching my head. I'm asking the Lord, I'm like, Lord, why do you want me to watch this? This is horrible. And it gets into all these things that have gone on in the country. It's like disasters of biblical proportions, defeats, just all kinds of really, really dark, devastatingly hard and hurtful things. So the guy that's doing the documentary, he's kind of like he never comes across as a Christian to me. I'm not judging the man, but he never really, he does go to church in the video. I'll get to that in just a minute, but he curses, he does some other things that made me think, yeah, this guy's probably not a believer. He's really looking for a juicy story, something weird, something sensational, so he goes into this red light district, he goes into all these places, and just like, what's going on here? Why am I watching this, Lord? So, General Rambo, knows another general who's, I'm not going to say his name on the air, but it has to do with not wearing no clothing. This other general believed that if he would fight with naked, that it would make him bulletproof. And he taught all of his followers to do the exact same thing.
So they're all fighting naked.
Yes, the whole army, the whole group. That was their claim to fame, or their moniker, or whatever you want to call that. So this guy that's doing the video, he wants to talk to that guy. He's like, we got to talk to this guy, General Naked. So he goes and he finds this guy, and they start interviewing him, and he's a born-again believer in Jesus Christ now.
The naked guy?
The guy that fought naked. His name's Joshua or something. I forgot his last name. Ayadai or something like that. And he's like, I'm trying to rehabilitate child soldiers now. Will you come? You want to come and see my compound? Like, yeah, sure. So they have to walk through this swamp, which is infested with mosquitoes. And so the guy that's doing the video, he rolls up his pant legs, takes off his shoes, he walks across this swamp. He gets to the place where they're rehabilitating soldiers and child soldiers and different things. And the guy, the naked general...
Is he naked?
No. He's put on clothes now.
Okay.
Yeah, he's wearing clothes now. And they put him on trial for war crimes, because I can't say it on the air, the stuff that this guy did, but it's like the lowest of the low of what a human being can do to another human being. I'll just put it
now,
that way.
who's the they that put him on trial?
I don't know.
Okay.
It's some Liberian governing body.
Okay.
And I don't know what it was. But they asked him, and it was on video. They showed the video on this video. They said, basically, are you sorry for what you've done? Oh yeah, I'm really sorry for what I've done. I've given my heart to Jesus Christ, and I'm a new man now. And they said, okay, you're free to go.
They said that to him?
Pretty much.
Oh gosh.
So because,
well, how do they know that's genuine?
Well, that's a good question. And that's the question the guy that shoots the video asks. But when you look at the guy, and you watch what he's doing, and again, video doesn't show everything about a person's life. It just shows a little snippet.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, it seemed like the guy legitimately came to Christ.
Yeah.
He's a preacher, and they showed clips of him preaching, sharing the gospel, telling people how Jesus was the only hope for Liberia. He's actually building buildings to help rehabilitate soldiers who are going through trauma and all this. So today, today is the 9th of April, 2015. I'm reading my Bible. I'm reading through the Bible in a year. And guess where I'm at? I'm probably in one of your favorite chapters of the Bible, Deuteronomy 28.
I like that chapter.
Which is the blessings and the curses.
Yeah.
And every curse that the Bible lays out there in Deuteronomy 28,
it's in Liberia.
Liberia, every single one.
Yeah.
But what the guy that shot the video brought out that was so interesting to me was, in the midst of this just broken down, sinful place, there's a church that is vibrant and thriving and meeting in stadiums and worshiping and dancing before God and preaching and reaching out into the community. And he said it's like a heaven and hell. It's like this, it's like you've got heaven and then you've got hell right next to it. I mean, it was really the guy that shot the video, and I forgot the guy's name, but he was just like, this is so bizarre, man. This is so strange. And he kind of ended the video wondering if the general who had converted to Christianity, if things got dicey again in Liberia, if he'd stay a man of peace or if he would take up arms and fight again. And that was kind of how they ended the video.
Well, you say that, and what's really running through my mind while you're saying all this is, a man of peace has to take up arms to preserve peace. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I think under certain circumstances, there's a time to fight, there's a time to, to turn the other cheek, but in a man of peace will know when to do which.
Yeah, but you've got to always have those arms ready, don't you? Because you don't know when that time may come.
But I think that this whole video and this thing out of Deuteronomy 28 was to me maybe a warning for America. Because I was talking to Nicole Stroud yesterday, the director of the Ozark Foothills Literacy Project. And by the way, I'm going to do a quick plug. If you know someone that needs to learn how to read, they have got a great organization over there that helps people learn how to read and write if they're at or below a 6th grade reading level. And they can be native English speakers or English as a second language speakers, people from foreign countries that would come to Batesville for whatever reason. And anyway, they run a great organization over there, and they're doing a kids splash and dash triathlon July 11th. It's a Saturday, and also an adult triathlon. We're calling it a super sprint triathlon. The distances are going to be pretty short, so keep your eyes and ears open about that. So Charlie, you can do that triathlon.
These legs don't run.
I know. These legs were made for riding.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, when I was talking to Nicole yesterday, I was thinking about the electromagnetic pulse happening in America. Now, people, you're giving me a face like,
yeah, like, what on earth are you talking about?
Well, an electromagnetic pulse is something that happens from a coronal mass ejection.
Oh, okay, I know what you're talking about, yeah.
So a CME, or a coronal mass ejection, the sun explodes and it lets out electromagnetic radiation from the sun, and usually the atmosphere of the Earth kind of shields it, and the magnetic field that's already around the Earth deflects that around the Earth.
But there have been times in history when they've been large enough that the Earth's atmosphere hasn't protected the Earth, right?
Right, and what it was, and I think it was called the Harrington event, and I think it was around the turn of the century, late 1800s, early 1900s, in the United States. And I believe the only real technology we had going at that time was the telegraph. And when that electromagnetic pulse hit the Earth, it set the telegraph wires on fire. It shocked the telegraph operators. It knocked the wires down, causing forest fires all across the country. And it pretty much fried out any electrical equipment that there was. Now the good news is there wasn't really much electrical equipment. The horse and buggies didn't get affected by it. Hand pumps that pumped water out of the ground didn't. Outhouses didn't get affected by it. None of the infrastructure of the day, the Pony Express, the mail kept going. None of the infrastructure of that day really was affected by this electromagnetic pulse that hit the Earth from the sun. But let's say today that were to happen, right now. Well, everyone listening to our voice, they would suddenly hear nothing. The radio, the transmitter, the computers, these headsets, the mics would just fry out. We might even be harmed physically from it.
Your cell phones aren't working.
Cell phone towers are dead.
Internet's over.
The pumps that pump gasoline out of the ground are dead. The plug wires that send electricity from your engine to your plug wire will fry out. All the computers in your car will fry out. Your electrical system in your home will fry out. I mean, we'll be thrown back in time hundreds of years to
the 1700s, perhaps.
Not really the Stone Ages, but I mean, we won't have any modern infrastructure. It'll all instantly stop. And our planners, our policy planners, call this like it's a real doomsday scenario for any country that would endure this, and especially.
And now let me ask you that. It will depend on what direction the Earth is facing when that pulse reaches the Earth as to what part of the Earth is affected. So one part of the Earth can be affected more than others. Am I right in saying that?
I'm not really sure. Because I think this event that happened, I don't know that they had any way to really check what happened in Russia at the same time, or whatever. But it would make sense that what you're saying is true if the majority of the EMP that hit, affected part of the Earth. But this whole EMP idea, it gets a little more interesting when you think of the fact that man can make EMPs, and man has made devices that can send out an electromagnetic pulse. It's said that if a nuclear device were detonated over the center of the United States at about 200 miles up, and it were to detonate, it wouldn't do any real physical damage, from the heat and the fireball and all that. But the EMP that came out from that nuclear device would have the same effect as the Harrington event. I think it's Harrington. I always want to say Carrington or Harrington.
I think it is, because I remember hearing of it.
But anyway, I began to think about Liberia and how it just spirals. It's just out of control. Now they do have an infrastructure, and not everyone in Liberia is just crazy, with mosquitoes and with all these kind of weird names and all this. But I began to think about America, and the policy planners predict millions of starvations in America. You know, if this thing were to happen, there
Well,
would be,
tractors wouldn't work. We couldn't grow food.
no, you'd have to get out there with a pickaxe or a horse,
Yeah.
you know, and plow the fields like back in the day.
That would tend to reduce agricultural production.
No doubt about that. So, you know, maybe I was watching this video in Liberia to get my mind wrapped around some extreme, weird ideas. And I know that may seem really strange, and I understand that, like, when someone tells you something, like, let's say you're Noah, and God tells you it's going to flood, and you go, what's that? You know?
Because it never rained.
I don't get it. I don't understand it. But the Bible says that there's these horrible, horrible things that will happen in nations that turn away from God.
And America's turning away from God.
And it's happening in the world right now. Now, it's not happening here so much, because I think we've got this generational blessing we're still enjoying from
Yeah,
our
but it
forefathers.
is happening here.
It's progressively increasing.
Yeah.
But as far as like, oh man, you know, when you look at the west side of Monrovia in Liberia, and you see people using the beach for a restroom, and you know, everybody in the whole country has AIDS. I mean, it's just like, oh man, you know, this is extreme. But again, if our moral nation doesn't get in order, we don't get our morality right, we don't get our ethics right, which I believe for a New Testament believer comes by grace through faith. You know, I think it's in Romans chapter 8, it tells us it's that grace that gives us the ability to obey God, to do what's right. And I know Titus talks about that too in chapter 2. So, but nevertheless, as a nation, we have got to get it right. And I think who's most responsible will be Christian leaders. Christian leaders are most responsible to do what they can do to turn America back to God. And I don't think one Christian leader can do it. I mean, you know, you've mentioned that Franklin Graham, you know, and how he's a man of influence, and he's got a lot of influence in a lot of churches and a lot of the country. There are some men and women of God who are poised to have national influence, but it's really got to be every community. Every community has got to get this, because, I mean, look at what's going on in California right now. I don't know if you've been paying attention, but they're experiencing like the worst drought
Yeah. Oh,
on
absolutely.
record,
Yeah.
which is, I forgot how much food California produces for the United States. 70% of the food.
Why
in
would
America.
God pick out California to punish?
Well, it could be all kinds of things out there that are going on that are unethical. So, but anyway, I think I just want to caution our listeners to prepare and think about some things that are off your radar. And if you're like me, you're working, you're going, you know, I'm trying to finish up my taxes, I'm thinking about this, we got church services, we got this, we got, you know, I got all these things on my mind, I got children going to sports, different directions, and it's like, you mean you want me to think about Liberia, you know?
Well, you know, I don't know that you're really asking. You're asking to think about the realities in the world today, aren't you? I mean, that's really
and the possibility. Those people got that way for a reason.
Yeah.
I mean, the people in that situation happened to them for a reason. And my best explanation is moral decay.
Yeah.
There was a cultural moral decay by people in authority that caused national dysfunctionality in Liberia. I mean, there are places in Liberia you wouldn't want to go. I mean, it is a mess. Even the warlord, the naked guy, he said, "You went there,
And you're still alive.
and they didn't steal your camera." He's like, "Man, I can't believe it." You know. So, but the heart of man, and this is the thing we've talked about at church before. You know, the heart of man
Is desperately wicked above all things.
hasn't changed. Yes. Yeah, Jeremiah's got it right, and so does the Apostle Paul. You know, all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. If you take Jesus Christ and this Judeo-Christian ethic out of a culture, it becomes you become the Ammonites. You become these weird, wicked, crazy, baby-killing people.
Yeah.
You know, and I just want us to, as a nation, we've got to turn back to the Lord. We've got to, and it starts with you. I mean, I'm talking to the listeners. It starts with you. You can't change thousands of people, maybe, but hey, get your life right. Get your house in order.
And those people in your family. You know?
Yeah, and begin to reach out to
Hey,
people.
hey,
that
I want to
have
tell you,
influence with.
there may be people that listen to this that think I know what's going on, but I got family members that think I'm nutty as a loon. Although, I will say, I seem to be getting less nutty to them with time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look at Winston Churchill. You know, I think he was probably nutty as a loon until everything he said came to pass.
Yeah.
And then the credibility goes through the window. I mean, I know of economists that predicted the subprime crisis in 2008. I know a guy I listened to, Peter Schiff.
Yeah.
Peter Schiff got on there and said, this is not sustainable. These numbers don't work. The housing market's going to crash. And then, Ben Bernanke gets on there and he says, oh yeah, it's not going to happen. The housing market's never gone down. It's going to keep going up. I mean, almost right after the words came out of his mouth.
It went crash.
Yeah, it totally crashed. So, sometimes you're on the fringe when you see the truth and you see the future because of, sometimes it's prognostication, sometimes it's patterns, sometimes it's prophetic. But there have always been people that have known, hey, this is what I think is coming.
Yeah, I want to say something else about this electronic, what do you call it?
EMP.
Electromagnetic impulse.
Yeah.
Okay? The technology to purposely create one of those is well known.
Yeah.
And I mean, countries like North Korea could do this.
Yeah. It's interesting, too, you mentioned that because my research on the North Korean nuclear program has said that they've detonated these nukes underground in North Korea, and they can measure the seismic activity from the detonation. And what they've said was it could have been a lot of dynamite.
Yeah.
That they may have lied about their nuclear program just to sound impressive and to wield more influence on the international community, and they just set up a bunch of dynamite because it's a small nuke or a large
amount of dynamite.
Amount of traditional TNT that they detonated underground. But it's also thought that the EMP is a very small explosion. You can build a nuclear device that its simple purpose is to emit radiation like the EMP. And I forgot the numbers exactly, but the Russians made several of these. They're just an EMP device. That's their sole purpose is to take down electronic infrastructure, and that's it. And then let the dying begin. I mean, you don't need to blow people up when they're going to starve to death. Plus, you save all the buildings.
Yeah. Say for example, Iranians decided they wanted to take America. An EMP is the way to go, isn't it?
Yeah. Because you only need one. And you could get in a ship offshore in international water and launch one missile over the country at a certain elevation, detonate that thing, and now we're going to go to war. I mean, we're going to do what we can to fight back. There's no doubt about it. But
boy, we're really hamstrung, right?
We are going to be hurting. Yeah, every computer down, every electronic thing is gone. I mean, your refrigerator is gone. I mean, root cellars and salt pork. I mean, all these things are going to have to come back, and all these skills that very few people still have. I know you plant a garden. My thumb's brown. I don't have a green thumb. I've tried to plant a garden, and I just kind of, it just kind of dies. But
what happens first? The first thing you need is water.
Yep.
Okay. Now, if you're in a big city where water's produced, where there's no creek to drink out of, there's a lot of people in big trouble in 3 days.
Yeah, right on.
I mean, how long can you go without water?
I don't know. Like you said, I think 3 days.
There is big problems in 3 days. And now you say, well, they could haul it in.
With what?
From where?
Yeah, horseback.
Probably can't haul it in. I mean, not in the quantities that would be needed.
Yeah.
And we're talking about this, and it almost leads into where I wanted to go today. But anyway, also an economic disaster. Now not as dramatic, not as happens all in 1 second, but an economic disaster could really bring chaos to the United States.
Yeah.
And I think it was Billy Graham that once said that if God doesn't punish America, he's going to have to apologize to Sodom and Gomorrah.
Yeah, I've heard that.
I think it was Billy Graham that said that. I can't say that's wrong.
Well, let me say this about that statement, because I've analyzed that and I've looked at the type of homosexuality in Sodom and Gomorrah, and I think it was more accelerated than what we have in the United States. I mean, Abraham went into negotiations with God over the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, and I think he got down to 5. He started at 40, and he went to 30, then he went to 20, and I forgot not exactly the numeric.
But God couldn't find 5.
Couldn't find 5 single righteous people in the entire city, not 5. So when you look at the United States, though, I think we got more than 5.
Yeah, but I want you to, because we're headed in a trend here.
I think
okay.
I'm agreeing with you there.
Okay, and here's the thing. Think about what happened in Sodom and Gomorrah. The men of Sodom and Gomorrah were Sodomites.
Yeah.
Now, were they happy to just consensually sodomize one another?
No.
Not at all, are they? Guests come into town, and they say, "You will let us sodomize you."
Yeah.
I mean, that's where it was.
Right. Yeah, it was.
And Lot said, "Oh, wait, don't do this wicked thing."
Right.
And they said, "Have you raised yourself up as a judge of us?"
Yeah.
So it wasn't just that you were supposed to let the Sodomites go do their thing on their own.
Right.
You had to be involved in it.
Yeah, you had to approve of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was wrong in their minds for Lot to even say that what they did was wicked. And not only...
You judging me?
Yeah, not only sodomizing one another consensually,
yeah,
but you saying it's wrong for me to sodomize and rape somebody? Are you judging me in that? Okay? They want people to participate. Now, where are we as a society? You're a Christian, you believe sodomy is a sin. You've got to bake me a sodomite birthday or a wedding cake. You know, they want them to participate. See? That's where we are.
yeah.
That's what this is about. This is about forcing people to participate in their sin. And it won't stop.
Yeah, they really want to be legitimized.
Yeah, it won't stop with baking wedding cakes. There is no end to this. Once you start going down that, and this is what's so important. And this is what really is what everything on earth is about. What mankind is about. What are they really saying? They're saying, God's got no right to tell me I can't do that. And here's what we have to understand. He's the creator. We're the creation. He has every right to tell us what we can and cannot do, doesn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, he has that right by virtue of the fact that he is the creator. But see, where it's coming from is they deny that God is the creator. They deny God.
Yeah, Romans 1, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's... Go back to the Garden of Eden. Okay, what happened in the Garden of Eden? Satan came in and he says, "Hey, does God have rules for you to follow?" "Oh yeah, from some trees we can eat and from some we can't."
Yeah, it's Genesis 3:1.
Yeah, well, just ignore God. If you become a law,
really say?
Yeah.
Can you really say?
If you become a law unto yourself, make your own rules. Don't pay any attention to God.
That's an interesting, in Genesis 3, we were talking about it at church last night, so it's fresh on my mind, but there was an interesting strategy of the enemy that he always brings into question God's Word. That's paramount, is to undermine the authority of God's Word in the mind of the listener. So, in Genesis 3, verse 1, Satan comes to Eve and says, "Did God say you must not eat any of the fruit from any of the trees in the garden?" And so what Satan does is he calls into question God's Word, and then he makes the standard harder than what it really was.
Yeah. He twists it, doesn't he?
Yeah, he took it and he twisted it. And then what's interesting is how Eve responds. And what Eve says to Satan is, "Oh no, he didn't say that. He said we must not eat from one tree or touch one tree, or we'll surely die." And what's interesting is God never said, "Don't touch that tree." They could kiss it, they could rub up against it, they could do anything they wanted to
They
that
just
tree.
couldn't eat it.
Just don't eat it. But when Eve heard Satan make God's standards harder and more difficult than what they really were, she responded and made God's standards harder than what they really were. And what did it build in Eve's heart? Rebellion.
Yeah.
It's an interesting look at the tactics of the enemy and how the enemy wants to raise the standard of what he requires us to do to where it requires our human ability to begin to, and then rebellion is birthed, and then when rebellion comes, the clock starts ticking on moral failure. It's going to happen.
Yeah. You know, I got to go to one other place, okay? And that's Babylon.
Yeah.
Under Nimrod.
Yeah.
Okay, now Babylon had a couple of rises to power, but the first was under Nimrod. That showed him he was a mighty hunter.
Yeah. And
he showed himself to be a great one on the earth. And actually, what was Nimrod great at? Technology. Isn't that right? He could build a tower higher than anybody else had ever built one. Now, in that day, that was technology.
That was a big deal.
Stacking bricks up was technology. And he wanted to raise himself up and elevate himself up to be equal with God.
Yeah.
To make his own rules. And it's the same rebellion. It's the same rebellion over and over again. We want to make the rules. And we want to say, God, you know, what right do you have to tell me what I can and can't do?
Right.
Well, he has every right.
That's right.
And actually, that's what my whole book's about. Yeah. It is. That's what it's all about. Is he's the creator. We're the creation. Let's get it right.
Right.
Anyway, can I go shift to another thing?
Are we going to talk about Russia?
Yeah, I've got to talk about Russia again. Okay, and here's why. It all ties into the same thing. Okay? I just the other day, I love to talk about Russia, and I was in a group of people, and I said, you know, Putin's one of my favorite people on earth. And the guy looked at me and he said, I would think Putin is just the opposite of you, like a communist. We have no conception in America of what's going on in Russia. Putin is one of the most avid anti-communists the earth has ever seen. Putin despises communism. You know, Putin says, we lived under this darkness for 100 years.
Yeah.
You know, the Russian people know better than anybody else what darkness communism is.
So what are some of the policies or plans that Putin's
putting
in place to substantiate his words? Because you and I both know politicians like to say all the right things. Right.
Okay, now first of all, I want to talk about the homosexual issue. Okay? And I'm going to read from this. Putin said that in 70 countries, homosexuality is a crime. You know, Putin was criticized for his law on homosexuality. He says, now again, this is Putin's words. In 7, homosexuality brings the death penalty. In Russia, it's not a crime. Russia recently passed a law regulating propaganda and child sexual abuse. The Orthodox Church has called for the criminalization of homosexuality. Okay? Now this is Putin talking.
Yeah. Okay?
Now I want to say this. This may shock a lot of people. The Bible calls for the criminalization of homosexuality.
Definitely.
In the Old Testament,
worse than that.
Yeah, in the Old Testament, the Bible says if a man lies with a man as if with a woman, he should be put to death. So the Old Testament biblical penalty for homosexuality or sodomy is death. Okay? Now, the Russian Orthodox Church wants to criminalize it. Now, I don't know that they want to make it the death penalty. Okay? But they want to make it a crime. Okay?
Can I interject something there?
Sure.
I don't want to break your flow, but
okay.
I was talking with my daughter this morning about the marriage between the Democratic Party and Muslims.
Yeah.
And the marriage between the Democratic Party and the homosexuals. And I said, do you know that when Islam has its way, they'll hang homosexuals in the streets?
Yeah.
And she looked at me, I mean, like by the neck, like kill them publicly. Do you understand that? I said, does that make sense to you? She's like, no. I was like, isn't that weird?
You know, I hate to say this, but you've opened up another whole topic, okay? And homosexuality is not treated the same way throughout the Islamic world. In various places, because Islam has spread over places where there's pre-existing traditions.
Right.
For example, in Afghanistan, they have a thing called bachabazi.
Yeah.
They dress boys
I know about all that.
as girls, they dance, and then they auction them off to go be sodomized.
Right.
Okay? And these are all Muslims.
Right.
You know? And
I
also,
guess the Iranian, your guy you pray for all the time,
Ahmadinejad.
Ahmadinejad.
Yeah.
He's the guy that.
Okay, now and another thing. This is,
Iran.
if you remember the ambassador that was killed in Libya, he was sodomized.
Oh, gosh.
Now, whether he was sodomized before or after he was dead, I don't know the answer to that. Okay, so the Muslims that did, killed him, sodomized him. Okay? Well, another thing, in many parts of Islam, it is a horrible disgrace that dooms you to hell to be sodomized. But to sodomize somebody just shows your power over them. So, to be sodomized is a horrible thing, but to be a sodomite just shows you got power. See, so there's...
Some hypocrisy.
Yeah, it's to say all of Islam treats sodomy the same is just not true. Just like all of Christianity worldwide isn't the same.
Sure.
So, but anyway, you really sidetracked me with that, Tony.
Sorry about that.
Okay, but
Back to your favorite
back to Putin
subject.
and the law. He says in the Orthodox Church has called for the criminalization of homosexuality, and then Putin says the law and the church, or the law and the state, are separate in Russia. So the church can have its point of view, and the government can have theirs. Now,
The church can't enforce their point of view.
they can't. But it's also important to know that I think his name is Patriarch Kirill, okay, is a close buddy. He would be like the Pope of the Russian Orthodox Church. Him and Putin are close friends. I mean, they're together a lot. Kirill has a lot of influence over Putin, okay? And Putin says, he said, does the Holy See have a different view? Okay,
The Holy what?
the Holy See. Now, this interviewer is asking Putin about his law in Russia.
Yeah.
And the Russian Orthodox Church thinks homosexuality is a sin. And Putin asks this guy, does the Holy See have a different view? Now, who's the Holy See? That's the Pope.
Okay.
That's who he's talking about. By the Holy See, he's referring to the Pope. Does the Catholic Church view homosexuality as a sin? I believe it does.
Yeah.
Okay.
For now.
Well, it always has.
Yeah.
That's not to say there hasn't been priests that have sodomized people.
Right.
But the stand of the Catholic Church is that homosexuality is a sin. Just as, have there been Catholics that have committed adultery?
Sure.
Well, sure. But what is the official stand of the Catholic Church? Adultery is a sin. It's wrong. I mean, that's the stand of the Catholic Church.
Right.
Okay, anyway, he says, does the Holy See have a different view? And then Putin says, read our law carefully. It's about pedophilia and homosexuality. Now, here's really what their law does. It makes it a criminal offense to have propaganda aimed towards children to try to recruit them into homosexuality. That's what the Russian law is about. Okay? And the whole world homosexual community goes berserk over it. Well, now, what does that tell you that their goal really is?
Yeah. Interesting.
If they don't like that Russia makes it a crime to use homosexual propaganda to recruit children into homosexuality, what does that tell you that homosexuals want to do? They want to recruit children into homosexuality. Okay? Anyway, he said, now this is Putin again. In Europe, there are countries debating legalizing pedophilia. That's being debated in the United States, Vladimir. Now, are we there yet? No, but it is being debated.
Where's that being debated?
In the homosexual circles. They are on their websites and whatnot. They're pushing for the legalization of pedophilia. Okay? Well, people ought to be free to do what they want. Right?
Just so it doesn't hurt anyone else.
Yeah, and if an 8-year-old child wants to engage in pedophilia or in sodomy with an adult man, what's wrong with that? What could be wrong with that? Well, that debate is going on.
Yeah, that's messed up.
Yeah, it's messed up. Let's see. Russia does not discriminate against people because of their sexual orientation. Again, that's Putin talking. Okay, and here's what he says. I love this next comment. He says, millions of people in Russia love Elton John.
Yeah.
There is no ban on non-traditional forms of sexual interaction between people. We have a ban on propaganda of homosexuality. Russia needs to cleanse itself of homosexuality if it wants to increase its birth rate.
Yeah.
Okay, you know, one of the blessings of the law is that the womb will be blessed. You know,
Now, in Russia, I know they have a national holiday called basically, and I don't know how to say it the right way, but it's go home and sleep with your loved one
Yeah.
day. So they'll increase the fertility rates.
yeah. You know, Russia is a great big empty country.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of empty space in Russia,
Yeah.
and their birth rate is not high. And why is the birth rate not high in Russia? It's because people aren't optimistic, or haven't been optimistic about the future, and so they weren't really anxious to bring children into that world.
Yeah.
You know,
That makes sense.
that's why the birth rate hasn't been high in Russia.
You know, another interesting thing on birth rates, I think it was in Brazil that the birth rates were like, in the previous generation, they were really ridiculously high. And then now, the birth rates have dropped to like 2, and it's almost like it was self-imposed
Yeah.
society-wise by the women of the culture. And they make statements like, the factory is closed. You know?
Yeah.
In Spanish, you know, they say the factory is closed. And they'll have 2 kids, and that's it. They're finished having children. And it wasn't anything that the government came in and said, you must stop having children. It was just that the people, hey, it's like there was an internal thing on the inside that said there's a lot of people here, we'll shut it down, we don't need any more people.
Well, actually, that's the United States is that way. If you're a working person, you know, you can't really, it's expensive to have children.
Yeah,
And most people have come to the conclusion, you know, about 2 is about all I can afford.
I'm
Because
on my 3rd set of braces, Charlie.
yeah, I know. You've got 5. But,
Yeah, I've
but
got
you know,
at least one more for sure.
the majority of people in the United States have 2 children. You know, if they're having any at all.
Right.
I think our average birth rate is below 2.
Yeah, I was heard 2.4, but I don't know why I think that.
I don't know. I thought I heard it was like 1.9 something or somewhere in that neighborhood, but I'd have to look that up to know for sure. But anyway, Russia wants to increase their birth rate. Well, homosexuality doesn't produce children.
No, you're right.
So if they want to increase their birth rate, okay. Now, next thing I want to move to is, and I'm just pulling articles off the internet,
Yeah.
you know, because you start going down this road and it goes, are we running out of time?
We got about 10 minutes.
Okay. The next thing is they start picking on Franklin Graham for agreeing with Putin. And because Franklin Graham does. And he basically says that Vladimir Putin's aggressive crackdown on homosexuality is the right thing to do. And I don't know that his father would have ever been that aggressive. But there's something I really want to get to. And that's down in, and I want to talk a little bit about Putin's economic policies. Oh, by the way, and I got to say this, another article. This was a big deal on the internet. Bernie Ecclestone. Now, you probably don't even know who that is, do you?
No.
And most people won't listen. He is the boss of F1. Now, what is F1? That's Formula One racing.
Okay.
And the reason this was a big deal is there was a big Formula One race in Russia. And the whole world homosexual community wanted it, just like they wanted to boycott the Russian Olympics, they wanted to boycott this. Well, Bernie Ecclestone said, I completely agree with Vladimir Putin on this. And you know, you talk about drawing fire.
Yeah.
Man, there were all kinds of articles about that. Okay. Next, I want to move. You know, people say, well, why do you like a Russian communist like Putin?
Yeah.
Okay? Well, first of all, my answer is he's not a communist. Okay? Russia is not, first of all, communism's never existed. It's just degrees of socialism.
Right. Not even the communist countries call themselves.
Yeah, well, what was it? The Soviet Socialist Republic,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Right? So, Russia was never a pure communist country. It was a socialist country.
Wasn't it because communism was impossible to
It
achieve?
is. It is impossible.
Because the heart of man's too greedy or
Yeah,
something?
but they didn't want to recognize that, but that is the truth. Anyway, so Russia was as close to a communist country, and China, those two, as any could be, I guess. But I would argue that today, the United States is more of a socialist country than Russia.
Wow.
I really believe that's true.
I can't respond to that.
Well, you can't.
I don't have enough information.
Yeah, let me read you, or let me back up and tell you some of the things that have happened. You remember Gorbachev?
Yeah.
Okay. Gorbachev came out with
the Antichrist.
with
You got that red spot
yeah,
on the
with perestroika and glasnost.
Yeah.
Okay, and basically that was a liberalization, a move towards freedom, towards a free economy.
Right.
Okay, and I remember my father, who I believe was a very wise man, said, "Hey, this is just a lie. They're trying to get all the Christians to surface so they can kill them all. That's what glasnost and perestroika is all about." Well, the truth is he was wrong.
Yeah.
You know, it was a liberalization, and it started things moving in Russia. Okay, after Gorbachev came, and I'm drawing a blank on the next guy.
Like Yeltsin?
Yeltsin, yeah, it was Yeltsin. Okay, now let me tell you what Yeltsin did. He printed up these certificates, okay? And he passed them out to all the Russian people, and these are certificates giving them ownership in the Russian state-owned industry, because everything was state-owned, right? Well, now nothing's state-owned. It's owned by the people, and these certificates are basically stock. Now, I'm not sure whether they were stock in a particular business or the whole thing, okay? I'm just not exactly sure how that was managed.
Yeah. Well, the idea, to incentivize a worker when, obviously, if you're working for someone else or you're working for yourself, there's a whole different mindset there.
But you know, it was really kind of like the closest thing I could make it akin to was,
shares in the state.
What is it? Profit sharing.
Yeah.
You know, and just to give you an example of a company that was in utter chaos, destroyed, was Harley Davidson. And they gave the company to the employees and said, okay, you make this company work and the profit's yours. And well, you know where Harley Davidson is today? It worked.
Yeah, right.
Okay, another example that's real close to home is Harp's Food Stores. You know, it's employee owned. Now, what does that mean? As you work there, you can acquire shares of stock in Harp's, and you can share in the dividends. Well, anyway, Yeltsin printed off this, I'm going to call it stock, in the Russian industry and gave it out to the workers. Okay? Well, the workers get this, and they're expecting the money to start rolling in. Well, you know, it's not rolling in.
Right.
So, they got this worthless paper. And a group of people that came to be known as the oligarchs came along. And basically financed with Western capital, they sent people into the streets holding signs saying, we'll buy your certificates.
Those worthless certificates.
Yeah, we'll give you money.
We'll take them off your hands.
Yeah, we'll give you money for the worthless certificates. And they bought them up for nothing, basically.
Pot of beans.
Yeah. And so these oligarchs become the holders. And you know, like one guy gets control of the entire Russian aluminum industry, which is the largest aluminum manufacturer in the world. Another guy gets control of the oil industry. This is capitalism at its worst.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it is horrible capitalism. Well, all kinds of feuds go on, and the oligarchs realize they're at risk of losing their power because the people hate them.
Yeah, right. All of their heads.
And so they pick a guy that they know they can control. Okay? And that guy was former KGB, and his name was Vladimir Putin. Okay? Well, as it turns out, they couldn't control Vladimir Putin. And he started throwing them in jail, or they started running in exile, and a few of them joined his camp. Okay? And I'm not going to say there's no oligarchs left in Russia today. But the worst of them, the worst of the pariahs, and they were horrible pariahs. You know, what we don't tend to realize is Russia is a vastly wealthy country just by virtue of its size.
Yeah.
You know, and they were stealing the wealth of Russia, the natural resources and whatnot. And so Putin went to battle with the oligarchs and basically beat them, or how can I put them under control? Okay, and I want to talk about some of the things. Okay, under Putin administration, the economy of Russia. Now, this is, by the way, from Wikipedia. Okay, has made real gains. On the average, 7% per year growth in economic growth, and it gives it for each year, making it the 7th largest economy in the world. Now, I want you to think about this. It's the largest country in the world. But after all this growth, it only makes it to the 7th largest
economy.
Yeah. So Russia is still backward, you know. But just by virtue of, I think it is, let's see, it's China, India. I think Russia is the 3rd largest country in the world in population. Okay? But it's still only the 7th largest country in the world today in economic output. Okay? But that's big progress from where it was at the beginning of Putin.
Would you say, too, that the communistic mentality just destroys the incentive
absolutely.
of a person where they don't want to produce?
Yeah, you know, this is also important. When all this turmoil with the oligarchs is going on, the Russian people are parading in the streets carrying signs with pictures of Joseph Stalin on them.
We want to go back.
We want the good old days of Joseph Stalin. Now, I don't know if people really know Joseph Stalin. This is one of the most evil human beings that ever lived.
Yeah.
You know, but they say we want the good old days of Joseph Stalin. Okay? That's how bad things got under the oligarchs.
Yeah.
Okay? And Russia is still recovering from that. But now Putin's in control now, and he's making these averages 7% a year gains in the economy. Is America doing that?
No.
Not even close, okay? Let me give you some of the other things. The gross domestic product has increased 6-fold since Putin has come to power, climbing from 22nd to 10th largest in the world. In 2007, Russia's GDP exceeded that of the entire Russian, the whole Federation of Russia. So Russia, you know, because when the Soviet Union went to pot, many of those countries are still independent. They're not part of Russia.
Right.
Okay. Let's see. There's something else I wanted to really get to here.
We got about 2 minutes.
Okay. In 2001, Putin, who has advocated for liberal economic policies, introduced a flat tax rate of 13%. What's your income tax rate in Russia? 13%. Okay, now if you're going to measure freedom as what can I do with the fruit of my labor?
Yeah, right.
Okay? Economic freedom. In the United States, you're going to pay about 50% of your income in taxes. In Russia, it's 13%.
Do you think that depends on your income, what percentage you
No, it's flat. Sure, yeah. There's a lot of people pay, half the population pay no income tax at all in the United States. But in Russia, everybody contributes.
Right.
It's a flat tax rate of 13%. Okay, and also the corporate income tax rate, which was 35%. And people say, corporate income tax in Russia? There's no corporations in Russia. Everything's owned by the state. No, it's not. Okay, Russia is not a communist country. Okay, so Putin reduced the corporate income tax rate from 35 to 24%. Small businesses get even better treatment. They have a choice of either a 6% on gross revenue or 15% tax on profits. Okay? We're seeing people from all over Europe now moving to Russia. Wealthy people. Why?
Tax evasion.
Tax evasion, exactly right. It's cheaper to live in Russia.
Right.
You know, they're not going to rape you on the taxes.
Right.
So wake up. Russia's not a communist country. Now, is it in good economic shape? No, it's still in turmoil.